Seconds. Just trying to get on Twitter.
Okay, hello there. Welcome to Plot Geekery, which is our new name for this wonderful live cast of ours that we don't seem to be able to start on time, thanks to the gremlins, who always seem to strike just as we're going live. God bless
Absolutely.
them.
Yeah, it's technical gremlins every week at the moment.
But we're here now.
Yes, indeed.
We are now Plot and Geekery. We have a new name because we've been enjoying doing this, and so we thought we'd try and put it on as a bit more of a regular thing, a bit more of a professional thing. He says.
I'm just tweeting out to let everyone know we're live, and
there we go. We've had a look. Sinclair is here. Hello, Sinclair. Hey, good to see you. Welcome. People are dropping in. We've had a couple of questions come in on Twitter as well. So we're going to be talking about that. So this week we're going to be trying something new. We're going to try something a bit different. But first of all, we are going to have answer your questions as we normally do. We're going to talk about the things we're geeking out about at the minute.
Yes.
And we are going to be following on from our conversation last time when we were talking about pitching and what we do for when we're pitching stories and all those kinds of things. So thanks for joining us. George, how has your week been this week?
2 weeks, in fact, since we were last here.
True, yeah.
It's been busy. It's been nice and busy, actually, which is not something you can say, during lockdown often, but no. I've had my head down writing. So I mentioned before, I'm getting back to prose, and I really got my rhythm back. So every weekday, I've been sat doing my working hours and getting books written, which I no doubt I'll be able to talk about more in due course. But that's been nice. It feels a bit like a bit of normality back into existence. I think everyone in my house, thankfully, is starting to find the rhythm now of how the lockdown works. How about you?
Yeah, it's been a tougher week this week. I've been doing the novel has been going well. I broke 30,000 words last week, and that was going well. Working then on comic stuff in the afternoon, as I've been trying to do. This week's been a bit harder. I don't know why. I think the weather changed, and I think that made a massive difference to everyone in the house.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I found this week hard, I must admit. Got 3 days writing done on the book, and I've decided to take Thursday and Friday off from the book to get a load of stuff done on comics, which I've also gone on at the same time. So it's finding that balance.
Yeah, and I think it's important, at the moment, for people to take every win as a win. I think, we're not living in normal times.
No, not at all.
And, I've had good weeks and bad weeks. This week for me has been a good week, but for you, obviously, it's felt a little bit unsettled, and it'll switch again. I think that's the thing. And I know I've been talking to people on Twitter who are saying, I'm not getting as much done as I wanted. I'm seeing people are being really productive, and I feel like I should be productive as well. And I think actually we've got to give each other a break. And give ourselves a break.
It's that thing of not comparing yourself to people. Which is so hard to do when you're on Twitter and Instagram.
It's a really good point, actually, for writers, that, isn't it? Is to not look at other people's careers and think, I should be doing that. I need to keep up with what that person's doing.
Yeah.
It's a way to drive yourself mad.
It is, completely. So the way that I sort of tried to pull myself out of the Maya today. I started the day by writing a list on my whiteboard, which I can't show you, as it has stuff that's secret on it.
I want to see it.
Yeah, well, you know what's happening. All the good stuff that's happening, just so I could start the day going, and I could look across my boards over there, and I could look across and say, "Oh no, there is stuff happening that's good."
Yeah.
And obviously I know it's good, but it's that moment I think where you get days when suddenly the lockdown feels like it's never ending, and it will, and these things will pass. And yeah, so it's important to try and remember the good things that are going on as well, I think. And yeah, definitely don't compare yourself. But then there is the flip side of that. There is a lot of encouragement going on online at the minute. So on Instagram, there's a little hashtag going on called Writing in Lockdown, which I've been...
All right, I haven't seen that.
So sort of just basically showing your word count every day, not to boast and sort of say, look how great I am, how productive I am, but to encourage each other.
Well, that's what you've been doing with your free write, isn't it?
Yeah. So exactly. So that's if you look at the hashtag on that, it's writing it.
Oh, okay. I didn't realise that was the thing people were tracking.
And if you click on that, you can see a lot of people doing the same thing, and whether they're writing 50 words or 5,000 words, they're just sharing it, and they're also sharing. We're also sharing how we're feeling when we're writing as well, which is important. It's been a really useful thing. Nick Ford has arrived. Says hello. Hello, Nick.
Hello, Nick.
Good to see you. We've also Sinclair says you can show us. We're really good at keeping secrets. Well, I'm sure you are, Sinclair, but I don't think we're going to show you just yet. On this, I've just had someone push something through the door. So
is it tea?
My sound isn't working properly. Apparently, is this the case?
Oh no!
Can everyone else hear me out there, or is it? Have we got any sound issues going on? If anyone would like to let us know, that'd be great.
Yeah, and just in case people can't hear Cav, if there is any sound problems on Cav's line, please post a message on the chat on the YouTube so we can hear that we've got a problem.
Sort it out, yes. My wife very subtly pushed a piece of paper through the door.
I thought she was bringing you a cup of tea. I thought, this is good. This is good stuff. But
that'd be lovely, wouldn't it? But so how are we doing? How's it sound, people?
You're very soft, Cav. Right. Well, we've said that quite a lot about Cav in the.
Don't really understand what's happening, but I tell you what, I'm just going to switch to the internal microphone on my computer and see if that makes.
That's a lot louder to me.
Yeah, you're not hearing it through everyone else.
Yeah, Expired Milk says success.
There we go. So right, I've switched it to the internal microphone, and let's see what happens. I don't know. Cool. What were we talking about before I had sound problems? So.
Writers talk about how they feel about writing and how they whether they're writing 50 words or everything's a success is basically my point of view on this.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm the same. If you feel like you've achieved something, you've achieved something, and so and it's to work out, I think the usual metrics we have for what, how hard we're working or fast we're working or, well we're working, I don't think it's something we can use right now. I think it's definitely.
And there's a whole host of reasons for that. It might be that, it's harder with your family around you and you've got to think about parenting and schooling and things like that. Or it might just be that you've got that existential pressure from the fact that you're in lockdown. And you can't go out, and and like you said, it's raining. Like the one escape that I get every day is I take my dogs for a good kind of 2.5-3 mile walk. That's not very practical when it's pouring with rain. So that I do notice the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was talking to Adrian Adrian Russell of Vault Comics, and he said exactly the same. It's the weather's having a massive change on how enclosed we feel, and the sun came out this afternoon and suddenly everything felt a little bit better. So yeah, it does make a difference, right? So hopefully now the sound problems.
People are posting to say yes, it's looking better. So
hooray! That's fantastic. Good news. We will try and sort out something better for next time. But we're here for now. So we talked about writing, and anything else happening with you, George?
Yeah, so I've been working on a little project. I hinted at it last time we talked, and it's not quite ready to go live yet, but I think I will tell people what it is.
Okay.
I'm going to be doing an online kind of newspaper strip for Newbury and Hobbs, running for 20 days. So I'm working with Mariano Laclaustra, who is an artist that I did a lot of Doctor Who work with back in the day. And he's a great writer and a good friend, and he's dived in and I've written some scripts. Just they're 3-panel like a dailies that you'd get in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And we're going to get 3 panels a day for 20 days, telling a Newbury and Hobbs story. So Mariano's hard at work on the artwork, and I will be announcing more on social media soon about when we're going to go live, what the story's called, and where you can read the story.
And is it linked to one of the books? Is it a standalone?
It's a standalone, brand new story, so it works as an introduction for anyone who doesn't know Newbury and Hobbs. But if you do, they'll be very familiar. It's a new case for Newbury and Hobbs to solve. So,
excellent. We shall look forward to
more news to follow on that. So that's been a joy actually to work on that. To have, this working on comics, when you get you write a script, you send it away, and some time passes, and then suddenly you start getting pages through. And it's just amazing to see, isn't it, when things come into life? So that's been giving me a boost.
It's one of the best things about working in the comic team is getting those moments where the things you came up with in a script, the things that go and start in your head, come back in a totally different way.
And better, I mean, that's always the thing, Even just these, which are 3 panels a day, Mariano's like, maybe if we do it this way, it'll have more impact. And I look at it and go, yes, you're right. You're the artist. Teamwork,
exactly.
Makes a big difference. So
exactly. And why are you doing this, George? There is a reason, isn't there?
Because of the Revenant Express, which we've talked about before, was published this week on the 28th in America, in paperback. So it's out now from Tor Books. Lots of bookshops still doing curbside deliveries in the States. You can obviously get it online as well. It's available as an ebook and an audio book. So if you don't know Newbury and Hobbs, it's a new Newbury and Hobbs novel to jump in on.
And if you don't know Newbury and Hobbs, do you want to give us a quick rundown of who they are?
Yeah, it's thank you, Sarah, for saying happy release week. Newbury and Hobbs are kind of like a Victorian supernatural detective duo, I guess. When I first came up with them, it was a good 10 years ago now. It's kind of I was putting everything into the melting pot of all the things that I love. So it's a bit of Hammer horror, it's a bit of Sherlock Holmes, it's a bit of Doctor Who, it's a bit of Steed and Peel from the Avengers, and then a lot of me. And basically it's Newbury and Veronica work for the Queen Victoria, investigating strange, spooky mysteries. So the novel is one of those. There's an ongoing character arc going through. Revenant Express is the 5th book in the series, but there's lots of short stories and novellas and comic strips and things that do little self-contained stories. So this new newspaper strip is one of those.
Fantastic. Well, so that's out now. Then the
Revenant Express is out now, and the comic strip. More news next week.
Okay, brilliant. Should we move on to some questions?
Let's.
We've had some questions on Twitter. I feel like I'm in a proper TV show now going. And on Twitter, we've had someone contact us. We're not in a proper TV show, as you can tell by the fact.
Oh, we are. We are.
This is all a set. This is all a map painting behind me. We had a comment here about Newbury and Hobbs. Sounds British in the best kind of way.
I like to think so.
Yes, absolutely. Right, Nick Ford over on Twitter and also here. Nick says, how do I pitch? I know that sounds naive, but I don't really have a feel for what a publisher is looking for in a pitch. More than a half-page elevator pitch, full breakdown, how long is a piece of string? I know. Now, we asked Nick on Twitter as well whether he was already agented, because we talked about pitching last week, and we talked about pitching comics and books and TV, and assuming, Nick, that you're talking about, because you mentioned publishers, you're talking about novels. If that's not the case, if you want to let us know. It's a bit of a cheat of an answer, but it's actually one that I think is important, is that when you're pitching as a new writer, as a first-time author, a debut author, you very, very, very rarely pitch to a publisher. the first job you need to do is pitch to an agent. Because that is your way into the publishers, especially if you've got the ambitions to go for the sort of the big publishers. They will only usually talk to agents. Now, getting an agent is no mean task, and it's something that takes time and it takes effort. And in a way, it's the first level of pitching, because you have to pitch to an agent to try and get them on board and try and to encourage them to basically represent your work. And the only snag about that, and it's quite a big snag, is that it doesn't just work from a traditional pitch like we talked about last time. Do you want to explain a bit more, George?
Yeah, so when we were talking about pitches, now pretty much everything we talked about last week was relevant to whatever type of pitch you're doing, in whatever media, be it TV story, comic, or a novel. But there are certain aspects of publishing different types of product, like a book, that are specific to a book. And in that instance, usually what you have to have is a full manuscript of the book you're pitching. So publishers still want to see the pitch. They still want to see the kind of boiled down synopsis and outline of what you've done in detail. They want to see character bios, and they want to know that you've put thought into the theme and the tone and where in the market this book could sit, what other books it's like. So a lot of that stuff that we talked about is absolutely beneficial to publishing a novel, to pitching a novel, but you also need to have the manuscript there alongside it. And generally, some agents will start looking at a manuscript if you've got, say, 30,000 words of the book or half the book, but generally most of them these days want the full book, and certainly publishers will want the full manuscript, because the way they look at it is they'll start with the pitch. If they like the pitch, then they'll start reading the manuscript.
Yeah. So by pitch there, we are talking about the synopsis, and the synopsis is it's basically a book report on your own book. It's a rundown of the plot. What happens? There's no keeping surprises from the agent. The agent needs to know all the twists, all the turns, boiled down to the very, very basic levels. Then from that, and perhaps a first couple of chapters, they'll have a good idea of whether they're interested, and then their first question will always be, well, can I see the full manuscript? And if you haven't got the full manuscript, they'll say, go away until you've got the full manuscript. And the same will go for when you're pitching to a publisher as well. They'll need to see, obviously, and it'll be the agent then taking your book out and pitching it for you, but they'll still need to have the book. So it's quite a long process. There's no lying about it. You have to have a book, so you've had to write it. But again, that's all part of the journey, and partly the reason is as well, they want to know you can finish something, because that's one of the biggest parts of publishing. You need to be able to finish your story and finish your ideas, and so that's why it's so important.
But it happens. So with Newbury and Hobbs, for example, I've been lucky enough. I'm 6-7 books in. I'm lucky enough to be able to go, right, the publisher know me, they know what they're getting, they commit to multiple books at once. So in the instance of Newbury and Hobbs, they bought books 4, 5, and 6 in one go. So I then delivered them. But even as an established writer who's written lots and lots of books and lots of different series, I still have to say, if I'm doing a new series and I want to do something different, I still have to write that first book in the series.
Yeah.
So they might be more prepared because I've got a history with that publisher to then say, all right, we'll buy it as a trilogy. We can see it's a 3-book series you're selling. They still want the first book. You still got to do that speculative bit of work. And with TV series, it's the same, but it's the script, isn't it? It's the pilot script. You have to have the pilot script written.
Yeah, they won't just look at the pitch on its own. They need to know that you've got a script they can read. For the same reasons, exactly the same reasons.
Exactly the same reasons. Comics are slightly different.
The comics, because you're working with a team and you're working with an artist, and the artist, for the best will in the world, isn't going to draw an entire comic to try and pitch it around. So comics do work on pitches and sample art and sample pages.
And some publishers are looking for different things in comics, because you're not going through an agent. So you're looking, some of them just want a written pitch and examples of work that you've written previously, comics you've written previously. Some of them want to see the whole team put together. They want to know who's going to letter it, who's going to draw it, who's going to ink it, who's going to colour it. And they want a few pages of samples of that. and a full pitch.
Yeah.
And it varies wildly. So if you're talking about comics, you need to do a bit of research into who you're pitching to and what they look for.
Yeah.
Which used to be the way with books, but it seems to be now it's much more write the book, turn a pitch around based on that book, get your agent to go to the publisher with the book.
And there's lots of resources you can find about finding an agent. There are the writer's handbook that comes out that has lots of information. You need to do your research in your agents. You need to find agents who represent the kind of book you're writing, because not all agents represent all things. So if you're writing a urban fantasy novel, there's no point taking it to an agent who doesn't represent fantasy.
There's romance novels, yeah,
exactly. And so there's a little work to be done. And when you're getting into putting feelers out to agents, but I say there's loads and loads and loads of resources out there for new writers. The other thing I'd suggest is Writer's Digest, the magazine. It's American based over here. The Writer magazine. There's lots of information in both publications and publications like them on how to find an agent.
Two books I can recommend. I think the Writer's Handbook's actually stopped publishing now. But the Writers and Artists Yearbook is still going, and that's got the addresses of all of the agents in London, basically, and what they're looking for. And another book called From Pitch to Publication by Carol Blake. Carol Blake is a fairly well-established agent, or I don't know if she's still practicing as an agent, but she certainly was. And she wrote this book as a guide for writers who are coming into it the first time. It talks you through how to approach an agent, how to format your pitch, and how to look at acceptance letters once you've finally got an agent, how to look at the contract with the agent to make sure that the agent's going to be representing what you need them to, and it goes all the way through to publication as well. So that's a good book that's worth checking out.
Yeah, and actually, there's another resource which I was going to mention later on in the stream for other reasons, but it's a podcast called Ask the Bards. It flashed up on screen. There it is. Delilah Dawson, Kevin Hearn, two very successful writers in the US. Urban fantasy. Both of them have written Star Wars novels. They started this podcast about 6-7 weeks ago, and it's primarily aimed at people who are starting out. And there's loads of advice in there about getting an agent and writing synopsis and writing introductory letters and the entire process. So I really recommend. I'll put a link underneath the video when we're done. I really recommend, and we'll come back to that podcast in a minute for a good reason. But I really recommend having a listen, because their advice is great, and it's again advice that's born of experience. So
exactly that.
And there's loads of authors out there who will help you with this, and there's loads of agents as well. Look at things like Ask an Agent hashtag on Twitter, because there's oodles of information there that you can go through.
I think the agent John Jarrold, who specialises in science fiction and fantasy, if you follow him on Twitter, he does at least once a month, if not more, ask me anything about publishing. As another good resource as well.
Exactly. So I know that didn't really answer the question you asked, Nick, but hopefully it gives you a bit more of an idea of what the process is. So good luck with that. We have another question that's come in from the world's biggest Ben Quadeiros fanboy on Twitter. What drew you both to Doctor Who, and why? And is there a difference between writing as a fan and writing as a job in inverted commas there? What drew us to Doctor Who? K9 drew me to Doctor Who. That's what, like in the late 70s, I was terrified of the Doctor. I was terrified of Tom Baker. He literally gave me nightmares. But I used to watch it for K9. And I used to quite often turn on, and when K9 was off the screen, I have to go and leave the room or turn over if it was a really scary episode. Or if Tom Baker was looming out of the screen, because he properly scared me.
Did he?
Yeah.
That's funny.
I know.
For me, it was Peter Davison who was my first Doctor, and I don't remember the specific first episodes that I watched, but it was the monsters. It was always the monsters. Tuning back in to see this guy defeating monsters all the time, and I watched from him through to the end. But during that period as well, I went back and we had at my mum's house we had B Sky B. So I was able to go back and watch all of the rerun. I think we talked about this on a previous episode. All of the old Tom Bakers and John Pertwees that were rerunning at the time.
Yeah,
so
And Target books are a massive part of it as well. So
yes, yeah.
The Target novelizations, if you haven't seen
the
them,
covers.
The covers are amazing. But they were short little books that novelized a story, a serial. And so they filled in the gaps when there wasn't Doctor Who. That and Doctor Who magazine, which had the comic every month. And yeah, I mean, there was Doctors and Sarah Jane. The Sarah Jane Smith was the first time I experienced her. Was reading my first novelisation. I'd never seen her on screen. It was The Ark in Space, and that was the first one. I knew the Doctor. I could recognise him from the cover. But other than that, yeah. And then there'd be other novelisations where I didn't know which Doctor it was at all because he wasn't on the cover. So I don't know who I was imagining then. But yeah, the novels were really important.
I remember going to the library and they had a few in hardback.
Oh, and they had hardbacks. They were gorgeous.
I do.
Yeah.
And I remember Invasion of the Dinosaurs and looking at that cover going, wow! And yeah, taking them home. It was those and the Conan books, and I was always drawn to them because of the covers. It was, those kind of Chris Achilles style covers on those, and then the Frank Frazettas on the Conans. And the fact that they were quite thin books, I could burn through them as well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You could devour them in a night, couldn't you? And
yeah.
So that's what drew us both to Doctor Who. And we were growing up in the 70s and 80s. Doctor Who was everywhere. I mean, it was both part of everyone's life. Around the 20th anniversary as well, around the 5 Doctors. I mean, everything was just Doctor Who mad. So that was what drew us. Is there a difference from writing as a fan and writing as a job? Well, the first writing I ever did was Doctor Who fan fiction.
Yeah, me too, actually.
I used to get in trouble at school because I used to drop in Daleks into stories about the Romans and stuff. But yeah, so I used to write for fanzines, and there's some awful fiction of mine out there in Doctor Who fanzines, which hopefully will never see the light of day, and little sort of novelettes that I used to write for a fan organisation called the Grand Order, which was from Manchester, and so I wrote some.
That's funny.
One of them had a monster called Hankada, and then Mark and I used that name of the monster in our Sarah Jane adventure that we wrote. So the parts of that came back to haunt me. And funny. I started writing for fanzines, and that's how I got into. That's what I could show when I was going for job interviews at magazine companies, that I wrote for Doctor Who fanzines. So there was definitely a link in. Is there a difference writing as a fan and writing for a job? Well, yeah, because when you write as a fan, all you've really got is yourself to worry about. When you write as a job, there's a lot of people you've got to worry about. There's people who own the rights. You've got your editor. You've got what's going on elsewhere in the universe, fellow writers and what they're doing. So, there is a massive difference because you're part of a machine. You're part of an industry. So you have a lot of other moving parts that you have to bear in mind.
It's a problem. There's a pressure there, isn't there? There's a pressure to do it right and to make it work in that context of that machine as well. I think the other thing I would add though to that question is you're still writing as a fan. You're writing it because you love it. And I think I've always had a personal mandate with myself that says I'll never take on a writing job if I'm cynical about it. Because I think that will always show, and it won't be fun to write.
Yeah,
it'll be a real grind, and I think it'll show in the writing. And it's not fair to the fans who do love that thing that you don't cherish it and do something with it for them to love as well. So writing Doctor Who, I mean, we've both just talked about how much we love Doctor Who, and I think that's what that stems from. That need and desire to write for the Doctor Who professionally comes from our love of it as fans. So while yes, there's a certain pressure on you, and you have to make it work in exactly the way Cav said, you're approaching it as there's a bit of you that's a little boy still sitting there going, I'm just going to write a story about the TARDIS.
Yeah. And surrounding by action figures, and it's quite often that my family come in and find me working out a battle scene for Star Wars with toy TIE fighters and X-wings, and I'm constantly got Ewoks and Jawas and stuff dotted around my desk, depending on what I'm writing as well. So the fan part of it is massively important. Robert on the feed, it was him who asked the question. My Twitter handle example, my admiration for the best pod racer in the Phantom Menace. Well, that's a question, isn't it? Love the Target novelizations. R.I.P. Terrence Dicks, absolute legend.
Oh.
He really was. I think without Uncle Terry, a lot of us wouldn't be writers or readers. Definitely. I mean, those books helped me read.
Yeah, absolutely, and want to write.
Yeah, exactly. It was weird. When I watched Day of the Doctor, so the anniversary, 50th anniversary, I was one of the hosts at the Doctor Who celebration, which was amazing. And in the evening, we all sat and watched Day of the Doctor on a big screen in the Excel Centre. And I was sitting in front of Terrence Dicks, and it was just the weirdest moment when they said, "Never be cruel, never be cowardly," and all eyes just turned and looked at him behind us. I was just very aware that he was there. The other thing about that is that I remember I didn't know what Tom Baker said in Day of the Doctor. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. Until I watched it again, because the roar in the cinema was so loud, it wiped out completely what he said for the first minute or so. And then it went into a very hushed, reverential quiet as we all listened to the voice. I wasn't scared of him by this point, so that's good.
The one thing I have to add, I think one of my greatest Doctor Who moments and things I enjoyed most about all the time I spent working on Doctor Who was working on the Dalek book and commissioning Terence to write a new short story. It was a prequel to Genesis of the Daleks, like an origin story for Davros, and corresponding with him and then getting that manuscript through and knowing that I was the first person to read it.
Yeah,
and sitting there and just clearing my desk and just sitting and reading Terence's story for the first time. It's just amazing.
And I knew you were reading it, and I was very jealous.
I know.
Robert says, the novels made me realise how great prose can be. Terence Dicks' style is so simple and fast and yet effective. Absolutely. He was a genius. Sarah's asked a question. My assistant Sarah. Hello, Sarah. You've both written in a lot of fandom. Is there one you haven't written in but would like to?
Yes.
Yeah, George is straight over.
Spider-Man.
Obviously, yes.
Spider-Man, Batman. Two characters that I have to write before I die.
For me, I would say if it's we're doing the Marvel DC thing, it's Fantastic Four. I need to read. I need to write the Fantastic Four, and Superman. I'll go big. If you're going to write any character, if you get the choice, I'll write Superman. So, other than that, I am ticking off lists. I've never yet written Transformers, and I grew up writing Transformers. I did actually grow up writing Transformers. I used to write fan fiction for that as well. I grew up playing with Transformers, reading Transformers, watching Transformers, pretending I was a Transformer. That was worrying to see. And
bet you were a Decepticon too, weren't you?
I changed. You didn't know. I don't even remember when you first got there. Oh, I'm going down the geek hole. The original generation. You didn't know if they were an Autobot or a
You put your thumb on them, didn't you?
Put your thumb on them, and then the heat transfer. And I love that. And so I used to be fascinated. Or was it Jetfire was a Decepticon who became an Autobot? I was always fascinated. And obviously Megatron they all used to be Autobots. Anyway, calm down.
Step away from the Transformers.
Step away. I need to write Transformers. I would like to write Aliens. I would like to write Terminator. I've been very lucky that my to-do list is largely what it's been since I was 10. So, but there are still a few there.
Let's face it. I mean, Star Wars was the biggest one for me, and I've done it, and now I've done it. I want to keep doing it, of course. But
I've written a tiny bit of Star Trek, and I want to write more. I've written an 8-page Deep Space Nine comic, and I'd love to write more Star Trek because that's my other big fandom. Excellent. Sarah says Superman would be awesome, and she'd be an Insecticon. Good choice. I used to love Insecticons. And George, you gave good answers, George. Well done.
Yeah, thanks. I did give good answers.
I'm going to let everyone see that. Good answers, George. There you go.
Thanks, Sarah.
Right, well, thank you for your questions. I think we're going to move on to the next section, which I realised I was going to bring a prop in a dice, and I haven't actually brought.
I can fetch a dice from just over there.
Do you want to go and get a dice, and I'll explain.
I'll get a dice.
Okay. So what we're going to do is, last time we talked about pitching, we talked actually quite a lot about creating characters, and this was one of the things that we then talked about. What would be good fun would be to together create a character on the show. And try and start spitballing an idea for a story. I think George is now back, so I'm going to put the camera back on him.
I'm back and I have a dice.
Now, then I was listening to Ask the Bards, and lo and behold, they did exactly the same thing. So I got on the line to both Delilah and Kevin and said, "I'm really sorry. We're going to sound like we're ripping you off completely."
Oh yeah.
I would like to think of it more, not so much ripping off, as a homage, which is French for ripping off. So go and listen to what they're doing on Us About, because it's amazing, because they're not, we're just doing this as a one-off on the show. Every week they're creating the story. So they've created a epic fantasy story, they've created a core group of characters, they've created a world, they've created the antagonist, and they're building up week by week how they, because they co-write as well, so they're building up how they would put together a story. So yeah, definitely I'll put the link downstairs.
Yeah,
downstairs? I'll put the link downstairs. Well, I will be downstairs when I'm typing it. It's very late. I've drunk far too much coffee. So we're going to create a character. What we need first of all, that we want a genre that our character is going to be involved in. Now, we're not going to do epic fantasy because, as I said, Ask the Bards have already done that. And if you want to go and hear a great epic fantasy split one session, go and listen to theirs. So what kind of genres would you like us to cover? This is your chance to tell us what to do. So I'm sure people do know what genres are, but George, do you want to give us some examples of genres?
We could have a crime story, a science fiction story, a horror story, a western, a romance.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's also urban fantasy as well. I think it would be fine.
Yeah.
Urban fantasy.
Exactly. And within those, you can go deeper. You could have space opera or kind of hard science fiction, time travel stories. You can have, like I say, urban fantasy. You can have horror fantasy mashups.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts.
Have we got any right? Chloe May. Hello, my daughter.
You know that is space horror.
Chloe wants horror. Well, there we go.
So look, two horror sci-fi. So we've got one horror. One horror, two horror, space sci-fi. So I think it might be a science fiction horror.
Oh, hang on there. Sarah wants romance.
We can put romance into it.
Why don't we try and do a horror romance story? A horror romance story?
In space?
Well, let's just see. Let's just keep it to horror romance, and then we'll see.
Horror romance, okay.
Horror romance. So we've got a horror romance story. We should be writing these down, really. I'll get a great piece of paper. The piece of paper that I got from my wife saying, there we go. Your sound isn't working properly. You are quiet. It's the first time she's ever had to tell me that. Okay, right. So we're doing a horror romance story. Which might be in space.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I didn't say, because I am at the minute putting together a story for a horror sci-fi story, so I'm probably trying to steer it away a bit from that because I don't want it to be too similar to something else that I'm working on. Everything gets better in space, says Expired Milk. It does indeed. Okay, so we're going to go for horror romance. Okay, male or female character? We should probably just roll the dice on this one. So
1 to 3 male, 4 to 6
female.
We got a 2.
We got a 2. So what did we say that was?
Male.
So horror romance with a male character.
Now, of course, we're going to need another character to have a romance with.
Well, you think, wouldn't you? But let's not get carried away. Let's not start, because we've still got great. Sinclair said earlier on, the evil side, bad guys, girls are the best. So that's actually a good point. Should our character be on the side of the angels or the side of the devils? So do you want to roll the dice again? 1 to 3 angels. 4 to 6 devils.
We got a 6.
6. So we have an evil character, an evil male character who's going to be having a romance. Well, there we go.
This is going to be interesting.
Is going to be interesting. Is our character young or old? Young or old?
Are we rolling the dice?
Go on, let's roll the dice.
Old.
Well, okay, but when we say old in horror, they could be very old.
Oh, ancient.
Very old.
No, I like thinking. This is. Yeah, I think we should play with that. We should go lean into it. Properly old.
Let's face it. One of the greatest horror novels of all time Has quite a lot of romance in it, and features a very old antagonist in the form of Dracula. So that's good.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Cthulhu.
Yeah, we're going to basically do Cthulhu falling in love.
Cthulhu romance. You can imagine the kisses with the tentacles.
I don't think anyone wants to imagine that. Well, some people actually do. Quite a lot probably would. We're going down a hole.
Right.
We've
got an ancient character. Let's go with ancient, I think.
Okay. We're going to ancient.
That's interesting.
They're a character who is on the evil scale. Again, we haven't got to say that they're completely, they're complete Dark Lord. They could be.
There's a really interesting point here about characters, actually, is that polarizing your characters and saying this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, usually ends up making caricatures.
Yeah.
Because everyone has to have their light side on their dark side, and they live in the grey. Best characters live in the grey. So this is, an evil character, for example, can be a nice person to the person who they're having a romance with, who sees them through rose-tinted glasses, who and actually they treat them very well and behave very well around them, but then they have a dark, nasty side.
Yeah.
So I think we have to find that balance. So yes, so at least some of the time they're in the evil spectrum.
Excellent. Okay, right. So we're talking about horror as well. So we've got the romance element. We know what that means, and romance has its own tropes and all, the things that you expect. And definitely part of that trope is the bad boy. The bad boy trope in romance. With horror, it depends how you define horror, because there is obviously the definition of horror being, sort of slasher horror, blood, gore, that kind of thing. There's psychological horror. There's also a more general term. When I think about horror, I think of it being a world where actually most of the time horror comes from the fact you've got very capable people who are out of their depth completely and cannot win, and they're constantly being. It's a difference between an adventure and a thriller and a horror. I think is the fact that horror, has a darkness at the end, which perhaps they're not going to be able to overcome, which is going to be very, very interesting. Okay,
and we've
got some comments here. I feel that Cthulhu would have a fine romance with the Flurkin from Captain Marvel. I
think you're right. That's
giving us images that there will probably there's probably fan art and fan fiction for that right out there right now. Maybe he's not evil, says Inspired Milk. Maybe he has a lot of feelings and makes bad decisions. So there we go. And Sinclair also wants to see
Flurkin.
and the Flurkin. That you are shipping those characters. So we've got who is our character then? Who are they having the romance with?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And just another question before it slips out of my mind. Are they the perpetrator of the horror, or are they the person the horror's happening to? We don't have to answer that yet, but we can come back to that. No.
Whereas they've got, because you have got the opportunity. Again, I don't want to get too Dracula on it, because that's something that actually exists, and there's also Angel as well in Buffy as well. Obviously, that's a great romance bit. But you have got that idea of someone who's lived for a very long time and seen their partners die or their friends die, and perhaps has been responsible for that. So that's something we can play with.
That's an interesting thing. I mean, and I think you're right. I think there is a trope there with vampires. Vampires and romance seem to go very well together. But what about other types of horror and romance? I mean, so again, some tropes. There's mummies.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be much love with a mummy, I imagine. Werewolves. Ghosts. Ghosts could be an interesting one to play with.
A ghost would actually be very interesting, because
you've got your long-lived character. Actually, they're not long-lived; they're long dead.
Well, that's kind of. Should we make them a ghost?
I think so. I'm liking that.
So you've got a ghost. Now, there's two ways you can go with this. You could either go that they're in love with a human, but again, that seems a little bit of a trope. But what if they're a ghost who's in love with another ghost who is trapped in another house? Because you can go down the route that the ghosts are anchored to their house. They're anchored to.
They're socially distancing.
They've been forced to socially.
They're in lockdown.
So you could go down the route of. Okay,
I'm liking this, Cav.
I'm liking this too. Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers. Obviously, at the end, tragic again. Spoiler alert. You know, what they kill themselves because they think the other person is already died. What if they were separated and they had a suicide pact, but then they never actually passed on? So they thought they would be, if
United
they
in the
died,
afterlife.
they would be united in the afterlife, but because they committed suicide, they stayed. It's quite dark, and I apologise.
It's really dark, isn't it?
There should be trigger warnings here. But, you know, you've got two characters who are then trapped where they are. It's just an idea. And that's the thing when you spitball on ideas. The first idea isn't always the best, so I don't know.
Yeah. But let's run with it, because I think it's got legs. Maybe there's a thing about this. Maybe this is where you could bring human characters in. Maybe the only way they can see each other is to use a vessel of a human character to get out the house.
That's interesting. So our one of our ghosts, or I suppose our antagonist, protagonist, because, you know, it sounds like we're focusing on. Actually, it doesn't have to be, does it? I mean, we're saying we're creating a character. We're not saying it's the protagonist of the story, do we?
No, but I mean, because we've got an interesting opportunity there for effectively a love triangle with a human and two ghosts who can't meet.
True. So that's true. So you've got these two ghosts, and they've both been pining for each other for years, and they've been horrible to live with because they're both unhappy, and they've been unhappy for a long time. Then you've got our male ghost falls in love with a human, and the female ghost goes mad, or vice versa.
Well, I was thinking perhaps you've got a damaged person moves into the house who's struggling, and there's a kind of healing that goes on, but perhaps he possesses that person to go and see the other ghost. So he possesses that. Say it's a woman. Woman's moved into the house. He possesses that woman, and uses her as a vessel to go and visit the other house. So he starts to spend some time with the other ghost, and he realizes that they've moved on, and he's got more in common with the human that he's possessing. So he's starting to develop this kind of weird situation.
Why would he wait for now to possess the person? There could be two. One that she said they're damaged. So
yeah,
he's not had the ability to, and they welcome him in.
Yeah.
The other one could be as well that the other ghost in the other house, the house is going to be demolished, and he realizes that once the house is gone, the anchor's gone, and.
Well, that's interesting. She's going to go. Well, then those two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
No.
Because one can become a pressure in the story, a time pressure in the story, but actually, the idea of, I think I like the idea of the person who's possessed having agency in the decision. It's almost people haven't let him in before, and this person decides to let him in. Maybe it's because they want to help him, because they're they're trying to heal him and he's trying to heal them, and this relationship forms. She lets him in.
You could have the fact that the person moves in, and he does the ghost does what he's always done. He goes and scares them and tries to drive them mad because he's not happy. So why should anyone be happy? But this character, and again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic love. It could be a friendship that blossoms because of it. Because this person, this damaged person, turns around then and says, "Well, I can help you."
Yeah, and in help him, she's helping herself.
Yeah, she's making herself whole or whatever. So they find a way that, which they've never been able to, and that's why he's never been able to possess anyone, because they need to be allowed to be possessed. So to help him, our male ghost, she lets him possess her. They go to where the other ghost is, but the horror aspect of it, the twist, is that the other ghost then goes crazy because she can sense the relationship he's got with this new person, and this other ghost has been, for centuries, driven crazy with the thought that her lover might find someone else.
So then that's when you introduce some proper horror as well, because actually then you've got a male ghost partnering with a female human, sharing her body as a vessel, trapped in a house with a psychotic spirit.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And then the only way perhaps to, and then you've got the thing of, who, when they are together, does the does the male ghost leave the female's body? And does then again we're slipping right to an end here. So apologies if we ever do write this and then you read it and you could have the male ghost saving the vessel, saving the person who and sacrificing himself for her,
which in turn actually heals her.
Yeah.
And also maybe there's a thing about him reuniting with his long lost love.
Yeah.
Maybe in the act of sacrificing, something happens, and those two end up being together. So you get a happy ending, but not quite.
Yeah, it's almost
straightforward.
It's getting very gothic romance. So we joked about gothic horror, but it's getting very gothic romance rather than sort of straight gothic horror. I like that. That's quite interesting. And so, how long did that took us? A good
15 minutes, 10 minutes.
10 minutes, So, and that's the kind of thing we do all the time when we're coming up with ideas.
We've always got at least one of these things on the go, haven't we? Where we're bouncing ideas over text messages and Skype.
Yeah.
We're doing it individually on our own. I've been doing it today with characters for a project. I've been putting together a map of all the different characters in it. And you've been doing the same thing, but then we come together to do it as well. And it's actually usually quicker when we do it together, isn't it?
Yeah, and we quite often do it together on each other's
on our own stuff.
Well. Yeah,
because what we'll do is we'll take turns to ask questions, won't we? So I'll go, I've got this idea, and you'll go, right, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And in answering those questions, I'm solving the problems and pulling the thing together, and vice versa.
Talking about questions, one thing we haven't asked with this idea is when is this set? Because we say gothic romance, and Robert has come on and said it's very Crimson Peak in a way, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Crimson Peak, a massive fan of Crimson Peak, because it is Del Toro, who is my spirit animal at all times. There he is. So we haven't talked about a setting because you could go Gothic romance period. You could go now. Where would you think?
I'd go contemporary with it.
Yeah.
So there's a point of difference. Because it'd be very easy to again, we've leaned into Gothic romance, but actually this is one of the things I like doing is then breaking the mold slightly as well. So you don't go, it's Gothic romance and it's Victorian. Now, obviously, Crimson Peak does it incredibly well. So why would you want to try and just recreate that? You go, actually, no, we'll do something different. It's set in the modern day, or it's set, in the 50s, or you do something different with it. Because I think there's something interesting in a modern day Gothic romance.
Yeah, exactly, and also that idea of different eras literally clashing together, and the ghosts would. I like the idea of the ghosts' experience time. They see that I quite like ghosts who don't move with the time, but no time has passed. And the culture shock that brings. Yeah, and you could have one of our characters here. Could be the male character. I mean, again, we could swap this around when we actually, if we think about writing it, a character who actually does, is quite. Again, the reason they can make that connection is that they are willing to acknowledge that times changed and people have changed, and then the other character, because again, you want your characters to have different. Different feelings and different
hasn't moved on
because they are locked in this romance, and actually, it makes sense that the other romance, the other ghost, who again we've assumed is a female, but it doesn't have to be.
No, not at all. I think
it could be two males who felt they had to commit suicide because they couldn't be together, and that could have driven them mad. So there's lots in there.
Yeah. I think there's some unpicking that we'd need to do there, really, about how those relationships play out, or is it a jealous man who goes crazy, and that's the woman who inhabits the body of the other woman?
Yeah,
there's lots of different ways round to cut it, and I think that would be part of that setup is the key to making that whole thing actually work, I think.
And that's where this whole way of bringing together, and we don't usually create our characters with a dice, but sometimes it helps when you. But
No, we
that's
haven't given him a
that's only
name.
a starting point. Yeah, I mean, we haven't really given them the things we talked about in the last show. We haven't given them wants, needs. I mean, we sort of know what the need is. They want to be with the other person, but actually what they need is to connect to anyone, and to connect to the world. Stop living in the past, which again, that opens up themes that.
And that's
work.
And I like that idea that it's the romance is between the two ghosts, and it's not necessarily a romance. It looks like it to the jealous one, but it's not really a romance. It's actually just about connection. It's about finding humanity again.
Yeah, exactly.
Finding their way back to living.
Yeah, we've got some other ideas coming in from other people. Robert says a contemporary gothic romance would be very interesting. I don't know if I've seen it before. What about the male ghost age? And if it's contemporary, will the ghosts get the vessel's knowledge of current technology? Again, I think that's something that you could absolutely explore. I see both these ghosts as being quite young when they... Because again, it's quite a young...
Romeo and Juliet again.
It's Romeo and Juliet,
I quite like that idea of them being flapper. 1920s. I like that.
You can have having the ghost from the 1920s flapper in modern day trying to understand current tech. I mean, I think, again, the culture shock is a massive part of it. And it would be quite interesting if we did go down the route of it being a gothic romance, of having it in the classic gothic romance, 17th, 18th century, and then
moving it to the modern
day. Yeah. So, yeah, there's lots of conversations still to have. It's not an idea that's fully formed, but it's definitely got, we've got the wants, we've got the needs, we've got a setting, we've got three main characters, we know what the triangle is. Yeah. What we now need to do is start working out. Also, actually, it's a good point. When you come up with an idea, we quite often come up with ideas that are a short story, or a novella, or a comic series, or a film, or whatever. We don't know at the minute, because we haven't really developed this, if this is a short story. It feels like a short story at the moment in its current form.
But it could be a movie pitch.
It could be a movie pitch. It could be in its current form. No, it's not a novel. But again, that's when you start digging into those characters and trying to build the world around it.
Looking at the conflict that's going to arise and how it's going to play out. Yeah, because there's not a plot at the moment. There's a premise.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the difference. And it's it's come from the characters, and that's what the stories we always like.
Well, this is what we always say to people, isn't it? And we always try and remind ourselves is start with character. And these characters are very shallow at the moment, but it's still what we've done is we're the building blocks of a story that's constructed from character and character motivation.
Exactly.
We'll then build on that and layer that to get to the plot.
Yeah, and those first things we said when we were going through that, I actually quite like this idea, but if we end up writing this, it might not be the sort of ending that we've just set out there, because that's literally the first idea we had. But no, I think there's something there. I think what we're going to do, we're going to go away and let that percolate, and I bet you we'll be talking about that together over the next few days. And we'll come back to that, and we might come back to that on the show. We might come back to various different ideas.
Next thing you might know about it is in 3 years' time, it's on at the Odeon.
Yes, and we will make sure that everyone here at least gets a mention.
Absolutely,
if not a percentage. Right, so there you go. I hope that was interesting. I hope that was helpful. I think you thinking about your own characters. I quite like. That was helpful for me, because I think we've got a new idea to play with there, which is always good. No, you were going to say something?
I think we should do this more often.
We should. Well, we do. Actually, it's what we were talking about earlier about on days when you feel like down and you feel you can't do anything and you're so mired in the work you've got on. Sometimes the best thing is to come up and think of something new. And the problem is then that you get shiny new thing syndrome and you want to go and write that. But
yeah, of course.
But what this does is get your creative juices flowing, and it gets you thinking about character, it gets you thinking about motivation, it gets you thinking about wants and needs and settings and all those things, which then feeds back in to your other work. And that's why I love doing what we do, of having so many different projects on the go at any one time, because you can go, right, I'm stuck on this, I'm going to go and move to this, and then I'll come back to that fresh. So that's brilliant. So anything else you want to say on that, George, before we move on to our final?
No, I think that's job well done. I'll put my dice away.
Oh, well, next time bring one along. Who knows when we're going to need dice again. So Claire says that was fun. Nice to get a peek of how things work. I'm glad you enjoyed that. And Expired Milk says, bravo, 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 bravo.
Bravo!
Bravo should be the name of the ghost. Bravo! Bravo Milk. Okay, so now we are going about the things that we've been reading, listening to, the things that have given us love that we then want to share the love, and also a chance for you guys to share yours as well. Do you want to kick it all off, George? What have you been geeking out about this week?
Lots of things, but one of the things I've appreciated most this week is there's a musician, a singer-songwriter called Bryde. We'll put the link in the notes, show notes. And she has got a new album coming out, and obviously there's a lot of bands in the same position who are trying to figure out what they're going to do in the same way that all artists are at the moment to promote their album. But she's decided she's going to just play songs for people from the album and from her back catalogue on Instagram. So she's been putting little concerts on for people. And Bryde is someone who I've paid to go and see. I bought tickets for her shows later in the year, hoping they're still going to happen. And I saw her earlier this year, before everything kicked off. And I've been able to have her on in my study while I've been working on my other screen. And she's absolutely fantastic. So I heartily recommend people check out her shows. And one of the things that she does that's really interesting for me is she'll play a song, just her and a guitar, but it's an electric guitar rather than acoustic guitar, which is what a lot of people would do in those circumstances. So yeah, that's what I've been listening to.
Okay. I've been listening to it's Roger O'Donnell. I shared this with you earlier on, George, this week. He was the keyboardist in The Cure, and he's produced an album called Two Ravens, which is, George and I are a bit obsessed about things like folklore and folk horror. And I played it to my wife, and it's a mixture of instrumental orchestral music and very haunting ballads as well. And Claire said that it made her think of walking through a woodland, and that's exactly what he said the album was about. It's about walking through woods, and it's sort of the isolation and the solitude of a wood and the peace of a wood. I'll put the link underneath. It's been for a week when I felt quite vulnerable and anxious about everything. It's been a very calming listen, so Brilliant. That's why I've liked it. But then the other noise, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this to work, because I'm trying to do it on my iPad, because my links, don't know if you can hear this. So my daughter, Chloe May, who's listening to this, has been working here in the house right next to me. Chloe works with YouTubers playing quite a lot in the background. And I find that quite difficult to concentrate with. So I quite often have rainstorms playing. Where I said it's really weird, because I didn't like it, the fact it was raining this week, but I quite like a thunderstorm playing to sort of block out of the noise. And I don't know if you can hear this.
Just about.
So this is a amazing thing I found on YouTube, which is a Coruscant apartment background, which is basically Padme's apartment from from Attack of the Clones, and I've just had it playing. It goes on for about an hour and a half, and it's open. I've gone down the rabbit hole of Star Wars ambient noises. I've worked this week in Yoda's hut. I've worked on Endor. I've worked on the Death Star, but I think this is my favourite, just with air cars zipping past. So I've loved that. I'll put the link to there. I've been loving, and I've not even been working on Star Wars when I've been doing it, but it's just been my background noise. So Chloe says hi. Yeah, hi.
Hi, Chloe.
Thank you so much. But because you were annoying, and I say that in love. I discovered Coruscant Nights, so that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Well done, Chloe.
So, and I think we've both been reading fantasy, haven't we, this week as well?
We have. Yeah. Well, I struggled to read a bit when this all started, and I read a lot of short stories. Couldn't get into a novel. I broke the seal by going back to a Star Wars novel. I read the third part of the Darth Bane trilogy, and that got me reading again. And then I have been reading this, and I've been raving to George about it.
Yeah, I've got a copy ready.
The Court of Broken Knives is the first part of a series. We had an event with Anna in Bristol, at the Bristol Fringe, BristolCon Fringe, and you were the other. Is that the one where you were the other reader?
I was the other reader, yeah.
So we, it's not been happening in a while, but BristolCon Fringe was basically in a pub on a Monday night. Two authors. Quite often, it's an author who's a published author and a non-published author. Both do readings and then do a Q&A. In this case, George was one of the authors and Anna was the other. And I bought her book then and put it on my ever-growing to-read pile. And yeah, and I decided to. I'd been listening to The Witchers. One of the things that broke me sort of getting back into reading again. I was listening to the audiobook of The Witcher short stories. And reading a bit of Darth Bane made me want to read more fantasy because let's face it, Star Wars is fantasy. And so I've absolutely loved this. In fact, one of the other reasons I think I felt bad these last few days is the fact I haven't had a chance to read, and so I was getting annoyed with myself that I couldn't finish off. So yeah, epic fantasy, dragons, swearing, violence, lots of violence. Really, really, really enjoying it.
Brilliant. I'm going to grab the one I'm reading as well. Hang on.
Oh, he's off again. We prepare ever so much. Can you tell?
This is Toll the Hounds by Stephen Erickson, and it's almost square, almost cubic. You can see how far I am into it as well.
You've been trying to get me to read this series for a long time, haven't you?
I have to say, hand on heart, this is probably my favourite series of all time now.
Right.
Of any novel series.
Put your hand on your heart then.
Hand on heart.
Yeah.
Now I don't mean my favourite novels, full stop, because a lot of, obviously I love, there's a lot of standalone novels. But as a work that's expansive over multiple books, and this is book 8. They're not all quite as long. I think this might be the longest in the series. It's 1,300 pages, and there's 10 books in the series, and then there's a prequel trilogy, and there's more other books, but they are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, and they've got politicking and violence, and I've cried countless times, laugh out loud. It's all about the characters, and again, it's going back to what we've been talking about. The cast of characters is large because there's obviously, so many books and so many pages, but you really learn to care about those people and what happens to them. And there'll be characters who drop out for 1,000 pages and then they're back again. And I can't recommend it highly enough. I know what puts you off is the size of them.
It's not so much the size of the book, individual books. It's getting into a series, because once I start reading something, I then want to read. If it's a series, I then want to read all of them straight away, and then I get a real sense of a real FOMO, fear of missing out, because then I want to read all the other things as well. So it's just me being very, very greedy and wanting to read all the things, and so I worry about getting so invested in a series that's long with such big books that I will then not be able to read everything else. But that's something I have to work through.
I've purposely been keeping this to 3 a year,
right, and
reading other stuff in between.
That's a good way of doing it, I think.
And I also dip in and I go, right, as soon as I finish that, the first thing I pick up next will be a novella, because I want something short and a change of, cleanse the palate. And I'll read 2 or 3 novellas, and then I'll read another novel, and then I'll read a crime novel. And then after like 6 or 7 other books, I'll then go back to Stephen Erickson.
Yeah. I will. I promise you, I will. I will read it.
I think you'll love him. That's all. I think he's a master. The first book was written 10 years before the rest of them, so the first book's great, but it starts getting really good from books 2 and 3.
Okay, I will add another tick to the days that you've told me to read the series. Anything else that's that you want to geek out about before we go?
Just mention we are drifting in time, aren't we? But Daredevil Season 2 on Netflix, which I've seen before. And actually, if I'm honest, I remembered it being a bit naff. I didn't enjoy it the first time that much. And I loved the first series. And I'm now watching them with my boy, James. And I I don't know whether it's because I'm watching them with the 16-year-old, and he's got seeing them with fresh eyes, or it's just because time's passed, or maybe because I went in with low expectations. But I really, really enjoyed it the second time round.
Okay.
Glued to it.
It's been a while since I watched it. We haven't watched Daredevil 3 yet. In fact, I think
Me neither.
that's the only thing we've not watched of that. Oh no, the second series of
Jessica. The third series of Jessica. Have you watched that?
We've watched that. We've watched because Jessica and Luke Cage. Luke Cage is my favourite out of all of them. And
so I'm going to start that tonight.
I love Luke Cage. Oh,
first time through.
Amazing soundtrack as well. Get the soundtrack. It's phenomenal. But yeah, I do want to go back to Daredevil. We've just finished Picard. We've just finished. We're coming to the end of Castle Rock Series 1. Clone Wars, goes without saying, is just.
Yeah.
I've watched the Phantom Apprentice. I've now watched twice. Once on my own, once with my family. It's one of the best Star Wars things I have ever seen in my entire life.
I cannot wait. I've finished 4 episodes now.
Right.
So I finished the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
And we're going to start the next arc. But I think James wants to start Luke Cage tonight, and then go in more Clone Wars tomorrow. So
yeah. Or I need to find out what James thinks of Luke Cage. Yeah.
Yes, I'll let you know.
It's the most. For me, it's the most solid of all those.
But he's not looking forward to it. He's nervous of it because he doesn't really know the character.
No, but they do it really well. And because if you've watched Jessica, has he watched Jessica?
Yeah, he's watched the first season of Jessica.
Yeah, so and Claire's a big part of it. So yeah, it's
and Misty Knight.
For me, and Misty Knight, she is incredible.
I can't wait for Misty Knight. I'm so excited.
She is incredible in this. I wish there had been a Misty Knight series. So yes, there's the things that we want to geek out about. We'll put links to those underneath as well. So yes. We have said, Sarah, a quick few questions before we go. Robert says Daredevil Season 3 is phenomenal. Comes to a head in that one.
Fantastic. Can't wait.
I do want to watch it, definitely. Have either of you watched Grimm? I haven't.
No.
It's something that I've always wanted to watch because it's the kind of thing I like, but it's too much telly. The good thing about lockdown is that there is going to be a gap of time where we won't get so many new TV shows. So I'm going to use that time to catch up on other stuff as well. So Grimm is actually one that I do want to watch.
I've not watched it either.
Robert says Phantom Apprentice was perfect. It really was.
Can't wait.
It's ready to be damaged by Star Wars. I mean, that's the trouble. You're watching the Siege of Mandalore and you know what's coming. You know what's coming.
That's the horrible thing.
And George, there's people here. There was one moment in the previous episode.
No spoilers though.
No spoilers. The people who've watched it will probably know there's no spoiler that Ahsoka's in it. There is a moment with Ahsoka and people that Ahsoka knew and worked with that I teared up a bit the first time I watched it. It was wonderful, and I think I teared up more because the fact that you know what's coming around the corner. Star Wars will break you. Well, there we go. That was a show. We have come up with a character. We've answered some questions. Hopefully we answered them well. We've come up with an idea that I'm quite obsessed about already.
I'm expecting us to finish on here and then get a load of texts.
Yeah, exactly. We shall put together a whole list of links of where you can find all the stuff we've been talking about. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for giving us some wonderful questions, and thanks for your support. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. We will hope to be on time if the Mac doesn't crash and the sound doesn't cut out. But, let's face it, things are sent to try us. But we got through it in the end. So thank you very much. Take care, and please do stay safe.
See you next week, guys.